Hello all, welcome to the show. I'm Gus Gagliardi and this is Fire Code Tech. On Fire Code Tech, we interview fire protection professionals from all different careers and backgrounds in order to provide insight and a resource for those in the field. My goal is to help you become a more informed fire protection professional. Fire Code Tech has interviews with engineers and researchers, fire marshals, and insurance professionals, and highlights topics like codes and standards, engineering systems, professional development, and trending topics in the industry. So if you're someone who wants to know more about fire protection or the fascinating stories of those who are in the field, you're in the right place. Welcome to episode 12 of Fire Code Tech. On this episode of Fire Code Tech, we have Anand Kumar. Anand is a loss prevention specialist with over 20 years in insurance. In my conversation with Anand, we talk about his professional experience and some of the lessons learned. We talk about the complexities of designing with FM datasheets and some tips and tricks you can use while you are designing a project with these datasheets. In addition, Anand and I talk about codes and standards outside of the US. This episode is very interesting, and I think if you are an insurance professional or if you are in the construction side of things and you want to know a little bit more about how loss prevention works and what that process looks like, you're going to enjoy this. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on social media. And if you want to help out the show, tell a friend about Fire Code Tech. Let's dive in the show with Anand Kumar. And if you want to find out more about him, there'll be links to his website and his LinkedIn in the show notes. Welcome, Anand. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really, anxious and happy to be here.
Well, awesome. I'm glad that we could have you on the show. So, I wanted to start off with asking you a little bit about your background and how you got into loss prevention and fire safety. Would you tell me a little bit about that?
Like we were talking earlier about how not nobody actually kind of aspires to be, I guess, in loss prevention or fire protection. For me, it was, I guess, I stumbled into the industry. I started off my career in, I would say, maintenance and systems engineering, attached to oil tanker doing maintenance on diesel engines. I was also a project engineer on a power plant in my early days after graduation. I always wanted to do something which I guess was not so routine. I stumbled into, I guess, loss prevention. And at that time, this was 18 years back, Allianz, I'm not sure whether you know Allianz. Allianz is a German insurance company. They belong to, I guess, the same group or same tier of insurance companies like AIG and FM and all that. These are the big boys who insure the big plants, the power plants, the oil and gas, and so on and so forth. So they were looking for someone who could, do um, risk assessment or loss prevention for the power plants that they were insuring in Malaysia. And I saw it as an opportunity to do something different. Got into it. I loved it because every time I was meeting different people, seeing different power plants, seeing a steam plant or a fossil plant, seeing a combined cycle plant, seeing a gas plant, so on. So you always had something to look forward to, or something that was going to intrigue you, or something like that. So that's how I stumbled into the industry 18 years back, and it has been, I guess, a pleasant journey for me till now.
That's interesting to hear. Yeah, I resonate with the idea that, there's a lot of funny paths into fire safety or, in your case, loss prevention. But yeah, I like your story about how you started off and got to, experience some of the projects with some hazards like power plants. And so I'm sure those have some unique hazards or they have some unique considerations in compared to other buildings. But yeah, that's very interesting. I like hearing about that.
To add to it, when I was actually working in a power plant, you never paid attention to the hazards, right? You were more interested in the operating plant. You were interested more on the operating parameters, or you were actually planning for an outage. So the focus and the perspective was was different. And then when you come and join an insurer, uh, the focus and perspective is on the hazards and how are those hazards protected, what is the reliability of the protection, what's the adequacy of the protection, and so on and so forth. So it gives you a different, I guess, view of things and a different appreciation of things. So that kind of complemented, I guess, my experience that I had that I brought to the table.
Very interesting. Yeah, I like hearing about that perspective shift of, you saw it as, somebody who was in the operations of the facility, for a power plant, and then, you kind of it put on a different hat with loss prevention. And yeah, I think that once the fire safety switch is turned on in somebody, I don't know if it can ever be turned off. But next thing you know, you're staring at ceilings looking for sprinkler protection while you're at dinner with somebody. So
And sometimes you have to tell yourself, stop looking at the ceiling because
I know I've been in trouble with that before.
every time you walk into a building, you're always looking like you're looking for the fire exit, right? It's like
Yeah,
you've been programmed, to look for certain things and evaluate certain things. And sometimes, it gets. I guess you wouldn't want to go to a date and talk about this stuff. Where's the fire exit? The
it'd be
sprinklers
pretty
are the
dry.
wrong way. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, so I saw that you just a little bit more about your background. I saw that you have some certifications that I'm not very familiar with. I was wondering if you would tell me a little bit about some of those uh, certifications you have. Like I see it seems like I've seen out of the states the MI Fire E fairly frequently, but yeah, I didn't know if you could speak a little bit on that.
you talked about earlier about fire protection being I guess a career that people would actually focus on, and I guess one of the reason it isn't is like you did mention earlier was that it is a new, I wouldn't say a new profession but a new specialization, I guess. In Malaysia, unfortunately, fire protection isn't a recognized subspecialty, if you want to call it that way. We are still very much divided based on the, how do I say, the olden divisions like civil engineering, mechanical engineering, chemical
Hmm.
engineering. So it's if you wanted to practice fire protection, you would have to go and apply under the mechanical engineering umbrella. So the
Mm.
majority of fire protection designers and installers in the country are pretty much mechanical engineers who do fire protection stuff. So there's no real specialist fire protection designers or installers per se, right? So that's one of the issues. The other issue is if you actually have a career in the loss prevention industry, or you do primarily fire protection, it's difficult to actually sit for what I would call a jurisdictional registration. You talked about yourself getting your PE and getting registered and all that. So if you do loss prevention and you do purely fire protection, it's very hard to get registered within the Malaysian context, right?
Mm.
So a lot of people who do something out of the traditional engineering fraternity typically fall. Because in Malaysia, I'm not sure how much you know, but Malaysia is very much a Commonwealth country. We were ruled by the British. In fact, we were ruled by the Portuguese. We were ruled by the Dutch. We were finally ruled by the British. So very much everything we do is very British centric. Our politics is parliamentary type politics. The administration is something that has been uh, given to us by the British before our independence. So even when we might talk later about codes and standards, even the codes and standards that we adopt are very much British codes and standards versus the North American, I guess, NFPA and ASME and so on. So, the long story short was because I was not able to actually get, I guess, professional recognition within my own jurisdiction. I decided to join the Institute of Fire Engineers, which is actually a registered professional organization in the UK, which actually it caters for the fire protection profession. It's basically an organization that is similar to the SFPE in the US.
Hmm.
You're familiar with
Ah,
the SFPE, right?
right. Yeah, SFP is very big in the U.S. I'm part of a local chapter, the Oklahoma SFPE group. It's not very big. It's only maybe around 30 members, but yeah, we get together and have talks sometimes. So
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
So the IFE is actually, I would say, a peer of SFPE, but based in the UK.
Mm.
And it's more prevalent in Commonwealth countries. So if you talk to fire protection engineers in India, you'd find that most probably they would be a member of IFE compared to SFPE.
Wow, I didn't know that. I
Yeah,
appreciate the information on that for sure.
hey, no problem. In fact, I think in SFPE, you have a member grade and then you have a professional member grade, right?
I believe I believe so. There's different gradients of membership based on, voting rights and some different things like that, to my understanding.
Yep. So the IFE has something similar. They just call it an associate or they call it a member, and then they have a fellow and so on. So if you had a recognized academic background, you could always join in as an associate member. And then if you wanted to be a member, you'd actually have to write basically what they call a professional review, that outlines what have you experienced in, say, the last 4 or 5 years in fire protection, what focus you have done in fire protection, and so on and so forth, to kind of, I guess, convince them that you have actually, been actively involved in this profession and you have actually gained knowledge beyond your academic training, I guess, before they
Hmm.
make you like a full member and so on.
Hmm. Wow, that's a very interesting process. I wasn't aware of that. I appreciate the background on uh, Malaysia and yeah, I didn't know a lot of that. It makes sense. I've seen the MI Fire E designation on some people from different parts of the country or different parts of the world. So yeah, that's very interesting to learn about that. I wasn't aware. I guess I was aware of the organization, but not about some of the application process and some of the intricacies about that. So that's very interesting to know about. I'll have to
Yeah,
keep an eye out for more professionals like yourself who are qualified like that.
no
But
problem.
But yeah, so you spoke a little bit about your career as a like an insurance professional or a loss prevention specialist. I don't know. How would you describe your role? Like sometimes I feel bad because I'll say fire protection as a blanket statement, and then my guest will be like, well, I'm not a fire protection professional. I'm a certified fire investigator, or I'm a you know, somebody in fire safety, or they'll have a different designation for what they consider what they do. So I always feel like I have trouble, like kind of dancing around. Oh, are you a loss prevention specialist? Do you consider yourself a safety engineer? But yeah, maybe you could touch on that while you answer also. What does that role look like? We talked a little bit about risk assessments and some of those different parts of hazard analysis and kind of taking in the different components of the building's fire safety features and compiling them. But yeah, I don't know if you could touch on that.
Yeah, sure. Loss prevention, basically, especially if you work for, I guess, an insurer, I've seen loss prevention professionals working for the oil and gas or even with the power sector directly. But if you work with the insurer, it's a bit more broad because when we talk about loss prevention, there's multiple perils, and perils means things like fire. Fire is a peril, or earthquake is a peril, flood is a peril. So when I visit a site, my I guess task would be to kind of evaluate the potential of a loss exposure based on these different perils. So let's say if I go to a machine shop and they were actually just doing cutting and welding of metal or steel products, the fire hazard is really, I guess, relatively lower because you don't really have combustibles to burn. Then my focus would be on the other perils. For example, is the location located in a flood zone? If it's in a flood zone, what would be the exposure, and so on and so forth? Or if it's in a windstorm zone, or a typhoon zone, what would be the damage to that facility, right? So when you talk about loss prevention encompasses a slightly bigger, I guess, framework that fire constitutes a big part, because typically people buy, and this can be different in different parts of the world. In Malaysia, we have what we call a fire policy, and then we have a property policy. So it basically, if it's a fire policy, fire is the only thing that's probably covered. If it's an all risk policy, that means I cover for fire, I cover for flood, I cover for earthquake. So there's so many policies out there. I'm at loss too because I'm into loss prevention. I'm not into underwriting, so
Mm,
you got to take my what I say with a pinch of salt. But the fire peril kind of constitutes a big part of that insurance policy. So when I'm on site, even though I'm doing a lot of I guess risk assessment that could be non-fire related, fire tends to be one of the things that you spend more time on because we evaluate, if you had a sprinkler system, whether the sprinkler system was adequate. Because one of the things that people don't realize is, I'm sure you're familiar with management of change, right? Management of
mhm,
change is a word that I've been hearing for 20 years. But in loss prevention and in fire protection, when people build a facility, they build to code, okay? But once
mhm.
when they change the operation within the plant, they might do MOC on their process, but very few of them actually do MOC on the fire protection that's been installed.
Mhm.
So a system that has met code when it was built may not meet code after a couple of years because the intent, the process, or the storage or whatever has changed, and very few people actually pay attention to that or even think about it. And I think if you've seen one of my LinkedIn posts, I kind of touched about it about occupancy changes and sprinklers. I did a short post on LinkedIn on that. So that's the reason why I guess there's a need for loss prevention people like myself to go out and make sure that what's been designed for intent in the beginning actually still meets its intent after a couple of years.
Definitely. I yeah, I deal with that every day. So I understand what you're saying. Existing construction can, we you touched on a couple of really good things, but I can understand the I don't know what to say about it. Pain points of dealing with existing construction, and I think it's interesting you talk about management of change. That's for those who might not know, it's more of like a process safety or kind of a systems engineering type of term, but just kind of means yeah, how would you describe that for the people who don't know? I'm not even sure I fully understand it.
Okay. I guess in simple terms is if you had an office and your sprinkler, I mean, you're going to design your sprinkler to protect that office, right? And in fire protection terms, we'd call it a light hazard occupancy because you have, I guess, you have combustibles. You probably have a chair, you have a table that's wooden, or maybe you have some carpet, you have some fitting on the wall. So, the protection design would be catered for that light, I guess, combustibles. But I decide to use part of my office to let's say store some toy products which I ordered from China, and I was going to do some online business where people could buy it from my website, and my office is now a storage and transit point for delivering those goods. I've basically introduced new hazard into that office occupancy because the toys are probably made of plastic, and plastic has a higher heat content rate in comparison to wood. And I have also now introduced the concept of storage within an office type occupancy. So I guess in the simple terms, management of change would be if you knew you were going to do that, you would actually get the fire protection consultant or fire protection contractor to look and evaluate if that light hazard design of the sprinkler system would cater for the new storage and plastic commodity, I guess.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. When you contextualize it with the fire suppression example, yeah, I'm a huge fan of fire suppression, and we deal with that all the time. People trying to store things in spaces where there's not designed for that. It can get pretty hazardous very fast. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Another thing you touched on that I really liked hearing about is how loss prevention is kind of an umbrella of hazards to a facility that encompasses a little bit more than what fire is. And so you talked about like earthquake and flood and fire. I never thought about the holistic approach of the risk for a building kind of being more than what fire is. I'm so needle focused on fire protection and safety. When I think of industrial loss prevention, I just am thinking about the big facility hazards, and I guess you probably look at it from a more holistic approach and about all the hazards for a building, not just the internal hazards. So that was interesting.
Oh yeah, I mean because a lot of people don't realize it that sometimes having a fire pump room in a basement area is actually the easiest place to get flooded, and then you have an impairment to your fire protection system. And in this part of the world, I mean, NFPA 13 has a section on seismic protection for fire protection, but a lot of people don't actually pay attention to it. And one of the things that I guess it's difficult to sell something like a seismic protection for fire protection is because, as there's different intensities to earthquake. So
Right.
a lot of people feel like oh, I'm not like in San Francisco. The earthquake we feel is just minor tremors. So it's not going to damage my fire protection. So I don't need to kind of abide to code on such things. Um, so
Yeah.
that's kind of the challenge of trying to, I guess, convince people that earthquake could actually now if the fire protection was damaged, instead of having a fire loss, we have I guess from an insurance perspective we have a loss because all the equipment and all the probably the goods have been wet by the sprinkler system. So then seismic protection becomes critical.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. Before working with a firm that does engineering, I, never quite understood. I knew that if you were in a certain seismic category and you needed seismic testing, but I didn't know that the you could get um, soil characteristics in essentially almost any part of the world with these expansive soils or these where these seismic conditions could be possible. So it's not something where you could look at a map and say, oh, this area is seismic and this area is not. They have to do geotechnical work to determine that, and there's usually a report, definitely always for new buildings, but um, sometimes less frequently for existing construction. But yeah, I like that point you made about how seismic is a struggle, because I've dealt with trying to educate people myself about the topic, and it's something that I didn't know about early on. But now I just know to, when I'm producing drawings, to go search for the structural engineer's drawings and see what the seismic class site category is, and take that into context when I'm designing systems. So yeah, I like that.
Thanks.
So I wanted to get into a bit about what would you consider the type of facility that would be your specialty. It seems like you've talked about power and some different high industrial type facilities. But yeah, I didn't know if you would speak a little bit about, what your where your experience lies, or, that sort of thing.
When I was with FM, I pretty much did everything under the sun. But I did a lot of work with the basically electronic industry manufacturers, like Intel and uh, Johnson Control and so on, where they were building plants in this part of the world. And since they were actually clients with FM had a very strong philosophy that they always wanted to kind of influence the fire protection design at construction stage. So I did a lot of work with these companies to, I guess, convince them to adapt the FM data sheets and designed to FM standards versus trying to take a shortcut and build to local jurisdictional requirements and so on. Um, that was my early part of my, I guess, um project type work related to fire protection. So I still enjoy doing stuff like that, getting involved in projects, doing peer review, because that's what we did a lot in FM. We did a lot of peer review work, meaning that a design of fire protection that came in, we would look at it and we would kind of comment if we felt that certain areas of the design were not uh, consistent with the FM data sheets, or had some deficiencies or something that was missed out, and so on. So area of involvement that I had, and I still enjoy doing that. I also did a lot of power plant projects, especially in Singapore and Hong Kong. In Hong Kong specifically, there was this company called China Light and Power, and they had two major plants, Castle Peak Power Station and Black Point Power Stations. They had about 16 units, and this was in, I guess, maybe the mid 2000s, when FM actually came up with some research about three-dimensional fires and spray fires and pool fires from a turbine generator. So FM did some mock-up test in the lab in the US, and it produced a video. I think you can find that video in YouTube or probably. It kind of demonstrates, because turbines are actually rotating machineries, and in any rotating machinery you need a lot of, I guess, lubrication oil or oil systems. And these oil systems sometimes are in pressurized conditions and so on. So if you did have a fire with a turbine generator, it becomes a very challenging type fire, So FM kind of spearheaded the research on it and shared that information with a lot of clients. And China Light and Power was one of the I guess pioneer clients, at least in this part of the world, that bought into that idea and wanted to upgrade their fire protection system for their turbine generators. So I was kind of tasked to help them, improve their fire protection system. And I was based in Hong Kong for 2 years, just supporting the entire project on the 16 units. So that was probably one of my, I guess, memorable times in my, I guess, fire protection and project type work. One, because it was a running plant, so we had to schedule installation whenever there was unit outage. So timing and so on made it, I guess, more challenging than a greenfield type project. Um, I also did fire protection work for a couple of power plants in Singapore, notably Tuas Power and Keppel. And one of the things that you get involved in these projects as an insurer is, um, we are always interested in what we call validation. Um, when I say validation is in this part of the world, and I won't speak about the rest because I'm quite familiar with how practices are over here. People tend to forget about testing and acceptance, commissioning, testing, and acceptance. So people install fire protection systems and they don't really see the need to actually do the testing and commissioning and acceptance to establish if what they had intended was achieved. You would, out of 10 projects, if you find one project that has actually done a proper acceptance test, that's amazing, right? So the culture of acceptance testing was not big in fire protection. It's still not big in fire protection, even for large projects like a power plant projects. So I remember very well when I was involved with a project in Singapore, and they were installing CO2 systems for the gas turbine enclosure. And I was working with FM at the time, so we asked them, if they were going to do a discharge test and they were going to uh, measure the amount of concentration of CO2 in the enclosure, and they said no, we're not, because we have already done our, I guess, computer or modeling simulation, and we know we can get the concentration, so we are not going to discharge CO2 and waste CO2 and so on. So, I mean, coming from an insurance company, you typically know, you have statistics that kind of support that, when systems are not properly installed and if you don't do proper acceptance, what is the failure mode, what's the failure rate, and so on. So there was a kind of heated discussions between, I guess, the insurers and the project manager. But finally, we were able to, I guess, put our foot down because we kind of told them that we would advise the authority having jurisdiction in Singapore. It's the SCDF, that from an insurer's perspective, acceptance and discharge tests would be ideal. So they finally did it and they failed the test. And believe me, in every CO2 discharge test I've done at various projects in power plants, they have always failed the first time.
Wow.
In that particular case, the concentration levels were not achieved. In another case, basically the enclosure bulged and started leaking CO2. So there were different, I guess, failure modes that happened in different projects. But these are the ones that are memorable because it's like you try to kind of convince people what the right thing to do, and you finally, I mean, you don't wish the customer to have a failure during the test, but by that failure you kind of prove a point, right? So those were kind of some of the memorable experiences.
Wow. that's a really powerful story about, when you're saying preliminary testing or commissioning or acceptance testing. Um, I wasn't thinking of kind of a more special hazard system like carbon monoxide, or not carbon
Carbon
monoxide,
dioxide.
carbon dioxide system. Gosh, carbon monoxide system. That sounds terrifying. Um, no, but yeah, and talking about the different areas for the system to fail, and yeah, it's often a very hard task, even in the U.S., to you know not just have the test be done, but get the right documentation and to verify, like you were saying, that the system was installed properly. Oftentimes for fire suppression, it's getting finding a way to hydrostatically test new piping added to a system, or with fire alarm. The company I work with does third party commissioning. So oftentimes we'll get into situations where we might retroactively go through and commission a system and verify that all those devices and systems are working. So, yeah, I like that note a lot. And yeah, I really want to hear more about your time at FM. I know you're not with FM anymore, but I've spent some time recently dealing with FM data, FM global data sheets, and designing with those data sheets. And so I really am very interested in that part of your career. And just, yeah, I wanted to know if you had any like tips or tricks for, I feel like it's so difficult to understand all of the data sheets that FM has, and when to use them during the design process. So yeah, I didn't know if you had any tips or tricks, or just what's a better way to approach designing a job per FM standards.
Uh, well, that's a good question about tips and tricks. I never actually thought of that before, but when you compare FM data sheets to NFPA, I think the FM data sheets have been laid out in a much more straightforward manner because I think NFPA 13 is probably just a huge document which tries to address every single occupancy out there that needs, I guess, sprinkler protection. The FM data sheets are more what they call occupancy specific data sheets. So, if I wanted, the sprinkler design for a power plant, I would go to FM data sheet 101 or 779. 101 would be for, I guess, fossil plants, steam turbines, and 79 would be for combined cycle plants or gas turbine plants. So I guess that's where the major difference is. It's not all under one umbrella. You got to go to different data sheets, specific data sheets, and they call it occupancy specific data sheets to find stuff. So they also break it up into different categories. So, for example, if you wanted to look for construction type hazards, you would go to, I guess, the one series. Hopefully, it's still the same because I left FM about 6, 7 years back. And then if you wanted anything to do with water-based fire protection, you'd go to the 2 series. And then if you wanted to do anything but extinguishing type fire protection, whether gases or water spray systems, you'd go to the 4 series. So it's kind of split into that manner. And the FM data sheets where it kind of, I guess, diverges from the NFPA is it also has data sheets on other hazards. So, they have data sheets on flood, they have data sheets on earthquake, they have data sheets for what we call machinery breakdown. That means how to evaluate combustion controls for boilers, for furnaces, and so on. Because I did mention to you that, loss prevention is beyond fire. It's anything that can cause a loss. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, boilers and ovens and all that comes under the 6 series. So it's kind of broken up in that way, and it's not difficult. Maybe one day, if you have time, we can get on a Zoom call, and I can do a quick demonstration to you how to use the or how to approach the data sheets.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that, and yeah, I just think that some of my the difficulties coming from a more in the U.S. Traditional approach of you know um, going to 13 for all of your sprinkler hazards, unless there's something very special for the facility, or going to 72 for pretty much all of your fire alarm for your standard commercial building. Is
Yep.
I think you get in this habit of going through those channels, and then I just had a job recently where we designed to FM global data sheets, and now you have, of course, your I think it's 2-6, which is your how you classify your hazards, and the hazards are classified differently than NFPA 13. A shop for a car or car maintenance, might be a HC3, which translates to an extra hazard group,
Yep.
which in NFPA 13 it's only could be only an ordinary hazard, and maybe even OH1, or maybe
Yep.
OH2. But so you find a lot of these differences, and and then to make it even a little bit stranger, you have a generator room, and then so you're going to a whole different data sheet for ignitable liquids operations, which has a dramatically higher density and area of operation. So it's a little bit difficult to you know grab all these data sheets when you need them for FM. But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to harp on you too much on it, like you said, because you worked there 6 years ago. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting, and yeah, I just had some struggles recently with trying to navigate those as effectively as I could. So.
Well, no worries. I mean, it's just interesting to talk about it. And I do deal with the FM data sheets off and on, but maybe not on a daily basis, even now. And I sometimes, when I don't find the answers in NFPA, I tend to go back, and thank God it's now publicly accessible. 10, 15 years back, it was not really on accessible to public. It was only to those who clients of FM. But
Mhm.
one of the major things that I kind of felt why I like the FM data sheets was, when you come to stuff like flammable liquid hazards, right?
Mhm.
Um, the FM data sheets kind of uh, intuitively guide you to look at it beyond just the suppression system, but also to think about, if let's say you had a water spray system on some flammable liquid, and that flammable liquid was ignited, the detection system triggers, and water gets discharged. Now the mixture of water and burning liquid, where is it going to flow? So you got to think about containment, you got to think about drainage, and so on. And I think when you just you in the NFPA document, it's there, but it's not so, I guess, obvious. And I find a lot of people, when they actually design fire protection for, I say, special occupancies like flammable liquids, um, you find that containment and drainage is not something that they have actually catered for many times. And again, I would say this is specific maybe to this region. But if you use the data sheet, I think it kind of guides you towards considering those factors. And maybe I'm being biased because I was 10 years plus minus in FM, and then so maybe they brainwashed me a bit too much.
That's okay. I mean, you can only know what you're used to, and that's why probably think that the NFPA is the easier road, because it's just been beat into my head for so long. But No,
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's good. Yeah, I like. I think you're right. FM is a more concise document, and if you are just looking for very specific hazards, I think that FM is easier. Yeah. So yeah, I can see what you're saying about the
yeah.
just for one-stop shop, if you will, for the more holistic approach to a building for the FM data sheets. But yeah, that's interesting stuff. So
There's, a, there's
uh,
another, sorry, if you don't mind me just butting in.
go for it.
There's there's another I guess resource that I still use is the Excel gaps data sheets,
Mm,
which I also find very easy to understand and very easy to, I guess, adapt. And in fact, after using the Gaps data sheets, I find them even more, I guess, layman than the FM data sheets or an FPA. So that's something you probably may I'm not sure whether you've seen those, but if
yeah.
you haven't, you might see them in future. Yeah,
Yeah, so I'm only kind of peripherally, I don't know if that's a word. I'm only kind of aware of the Excel gaps data sheets, or the I guess they're probably not data sheets, whatever they're
yeah,
however you classify their standards, mostly because uh, they are big in the SFPE community, and I've seen some of their just through Googling and trying to find out information on fire protection, I've seen some of their papers before and been really impressed about the detail and you know, but yeah, so I'm kind of aware of them. But
okay,
yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to take a look at some more of those again. I haven't had a project yet come across my desk where they've been required, so I
okay.
guess
But
just see.
theirs are also kind of arranged in the, I guess, occupancy centric kind of approach.
Ah, I see. I like that. So yeah, I wanted to get a little bit about what you're doing now, and I understand that you have your own kind of consulting practice now, but yeah, I wanted to talk about the kind of work you're performing now. I know you were saying that you still like to get involved with peer review, and so get into that sort of thing. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say I'm doing anything different. I guess instead of being attached to organization or an insurer, I'm just doing it independently now, because there's a market for a lot of insurance companies don't like to keep in-house engineers or in-house consultants because that becomes an overhead, that becomes a fixed cost. So they rather employ someone on a need to basis. So there's a market for that. So last year when AIG was downsizing, I guess I was one of the lucky ones. So and I was kind of thinking, what should I do next? Or should I go work for another corporate, or try something different? And I decided, trying something different would be, I guess, more fun. So and you tend to do things. I guess, more variety. When I say variety is, sometimes clients ask me to do risk assessment based on the British standards. Sometimes a client asks me to do risk assessment based on an FPA, sometimes based on FM. So it gives me a bit more broad-based exposure to the different requirements. Currently, I'm actually doing a peer review for a client in the Middle East, and it's actually a sugar refinery. So it was fun because it reminded me of the imperial sugar incident back in 2008. So I was doing a lot of read up about that loss, and as part of my peer review exercise. So you do a lot of uh, a variety of work. I had a client that their insurer told them that their fire protection or their sprinkler systems were inadequate, and they didn't believe the insurer, so they wanted a kind of independent opinion. So I got involved, and probably after what I shared with them, they got even more upset because they were actually dealing with flammable and combustible liquids, and the sprinkler system they had installed was probably only fit for OH1. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, so in that perspective, what I've found in the last 1 year is um, I've been doing a lot more variety type of work, and instead of having a standard scope, because if you work for an insurer, it's typically you're going out, you're doing a risk assessment, you're trying to quantify the risk, and you're producing a report, right? So it's kind of every job is kind of preset in its nature. It's been defined, but in the independent market, it's typically what your client or your customer wants you to do. So like
Mm.
I said, they may want you to just benchmark to the local codes. They might want to you to benchmark against international codes, or they might just want you to like I said, the sprinkler analysis. So it can be split, it can be diced, it can be broken up into different things, and they define what they want. So you do it to what you've been asked to do, and that kind of keeps it interesting.
Yeah. I think that's one of the best parts about consulting is the variety of the work. You've mentioned a couple times how you've gotten to have fun and by being involved with a lot of different types of projects and very interesting projects and hazards. That's pretty cool about the sugar plant. And yeah, I imagine that there are some combustible dust hazards, which I always like to hear about. But yeah, no, I feel like I would kick myself if I didn't ask you about, you talked about benchmarking to different standards and, different qualifications for systems. But yeah, I really wanted to ask you about your sense of how to navigate codes and standards. Really, I'm just super fascinated with the codes and standards process outside of the US. So, yeah, I just wanted to hear a little bit about how you navigate codes and standards when you're going into somewhere new, or maybe it could be like a country you're not used to, or yeah, I don't know. I'd just like to hear more about um, your sense of the codes and standards outside of the U.S. and kind of how you navigate that, I guess.
Yeah. So well, I think NFPA is quite widely adopted. Okay, I'll say it's quite widely adopted, but it's not widely implemented to the letter. Okay, so
Mhm.
that's one of the challenges, right? So if someone tells you, oh, our design is to NFPA, you can't take it to face value. That's one of the challenges in this part of the world. The second thing I probably like to share is, yeah, we have the Australian standards, we have the British standards, we have the European norms, and so on. Now, I mean, fire protection is so huge, but let's just talk about like sprinkler systems. Um, the When you talk about sprinklers, you have the I guess the design specifications, and then you have the installation, and then you have the commissioning. So when you talk about installation, regardless of I guess standard, whether it's the European standard or it's the Australian standard or it's the NFPA or it's the local standard, there's very little I guess difference. I mean, all standards recognize that the further away you put your sprinkler head from the ceiling, the longer it's going to take to discharge because heat and smoke accumulates below the ceiling, and if it's too far away, you're going to delay activation. So you have to install it as close as possible. NFPA gives, I think, 300 mm or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. So when it comes to installation, it's you hardly find major, I guess, differences. And then when you come to the commissioning and testing, it's again pretty much consistent. If you had sprinkler piping, you want to do you want to flush the system, you want to do a pressure test, and so on. So um, all standards talk about the same thing. Where it differs is actually where the design specification is. European norm may ask for a different density. The British standard may ask for a different density. An FPA might ask for a different density. The Australian standard may ask for a different density. So if you, so I guess if you have used them frequently enough, then you realize that where the difference are, and then you just focus on where it matters, and that kind of as time goes by, I guess you just get familiar with it and you get used to it, and it helps you, I guess, a bit in your analysis and so on.
Yeah. Definitely, I understand what you're saying. I was talking with somebody recently about this same kind of topic, and they were saying, well, fire science is fire science no matter where you go around the world. So there's a lot of similarities, and as long as you have a strong understanding of the fundamentals, there's a lot of crossover in these in the different parts of the world. So yeah, I like what you said about that, but I wanted to end with a question about professional development for you, but yeah, I've seen you post a lot of really good stuff on LinkedIn, and I feel like you have a good sense of what's happening in the industry, and it seems like you read a lot of the same good publications I enjoy. But yeah, I just wanted to know, what do you see as a trend in the industry right now, or where do you kind of see your profession going in the future?
Well, one of the things that I kind of like to highlight was when I started in this profession, information was not so easily available, right? When I say information was not so easily available, was like what we have today. Social media, LinkedIn has kind of changed the landscape of professional development. I think in today's world, it's whether you have the yearning to improve yourself. If you want to improve yourself, it's out there. You just have to look for the information. It's that easy. 20 years back, I guess it was there. It wasn't so easily available. It was probably in a book. You probably need to buy the book, order the book, buy the book, or something like that. And there was less webinars, so there wasn't information was not so easily available compared to what it is today. And especially during this pandemic period, you find that a lot of classroom-based trainings are now being posted on the web, on LinkedIn or and so on, and it has made it so much easier for someone who is looking for information or looking to improve themselves to have it at their fingertips. So that's I guess the biggest change, and I'm a strong believer that professional development doesn't have to be formal. It can be in a very informal means. When I say informal means everything doesn't have to be a certification process. It can always be bits and pieces, and you will it all add up one day. So that's my bit about professional development. I think in today's environment, it's at your fingertips. It's whether you want to tap on it or you don't want to. If you're still waiting for someone to spoon feed you, then I think that's never going to happen, right? Or it probably take longer than it should be. So that's my bit about professional development.
Yeah, I like that. I definitely am with you on the fact that there's more resources now than there's ever been, and if you're having trouble, you just need to look a little bit harder because I don't know. I think that there's a lot out there, and I've kind of got into this whole podcast thing for helping putting out one more informal resource, and so yeah. So I hope people enjoy it, and But yeah, anyways, Anand, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed speaking with you. We didn't get to all our topics, but maybe we'll have to do this again sometime in the future.
Thanks, Gus. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and it's always nice talking to someone about stuff that kind of ticks you. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Be sure to share the episode with a friend if you enjoyed it. Don't forget that fire protection and life safety is serious business. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are by no means a professional consultation or a codes and standards interpretation. Be sure to contact a licensed professional if you are getting involved with fire protection and or life safety. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.